Homelessness goes up across the metro area, while unsheltered homelessness drops sharply in Denver.
We don't believe that we have to be a city where people have to live in tents.
A class action lawsuit against the landlord of an apartment complex deemed too unsafe for people to live there. They want back rent and a place to live. Leaders at the state capitol brag that schools are finally fully funded. So why are districts going to the ballot to ask taxpayers for more money? And as hospitals work to save babies in NICUs, a nonprofit in Colorado makes sure their parents are supported through that incredibly stressful time. We'll boost their efforts together tonight on Next. Denver has seen a significant drop in unsheltered homelessness. Honestly, anything else would be a shock after the city spent tens of millions of dollars moving people into shelters. Our Mark Salinger reports on Denver joining Houston to lead the country in reducing unsheltered homelessness.
In a year when Denver spent more than $150 million to try and solve homelessness, new data brings hope that the plan is working.
This is absolutely worth every dollar that we put into this. We're seeing great outcomes out of the money that we've spent on this.
Cole Chandler is the senior advisor on homelessness to the mayor of Denver. While the number of people living in shelters in Denver rose 20% last year, the number of people living unsheltered on the streets dropped 11%. That's according to new data released today from the point-in-time count. The count is a yearly snapshot of homelessness on a single day in January.
A lot of the folks that moved from unsheltered homelessness went into our all-in mile-high sites where they're now receiving wraparound services and on the path to permanent housing.
More than 1,200 people are still living in hotel shelters and tiny home communities today. Nearly 600 more are in permanent housing. The goal is to solve unsheltered homelessness, something no other major American city has done. Take these, for example. Seattle saw a 28% increase in unsheltered homelessness, according to its point-in-time counts between 2022 and 2024. Chicago saw a 65% increase from its count. And unsheltered homelessness went up 11.5% in Washington, D.C. this year, according to the count there.
Behind these numbers are real people and real families, and it's important to remember that.
Rebecca Meyer is the interim executive director of the Metro Denver Homelessness Initiative, which conducted the count here. While unsheltered homelessness went down in Denver, it went up in other nearby counties like Jefferson and Adams.
We had a 6% increase for folks who were staying in an unsheltered location.
While the number of families living on the street decreased 83% in Denver, it increased by 49% in areas outside of the city. It's a sign there's still more work to do.
We saw a historic reduction in unsheltered homelessness. However, regionally, we didn't necessarily see the same thing.
The point-in-time count was taken back in January, which you might remember was right in the middle of tens of thousands of Venezuelan migrants arriving in Colorado. While more than 4,000 were living in shelters at that time, they were not included as part of this count. However, anyone who was living out on the street, regardless of where they were from, if they were in a tent, they were included in this, Kyle.
You don't need a study to tell you how many fewer people are living in tents. You just drive around Denver, you can see the difference.
Yeah, you can really see the difference if you're driving anywhere down Denver. You say, hey, there aren't as many tents, and we actually know exactly how many tents there were in January compared to now. In January, there were 242 that were counted. Today, I'm told by the mayor's office that there are 117. They're tracking them that closely down to individual tents.
Mark Salinger, thank you. A judge says the landlord, described by Aurora's mayor as an out-of-state slumlord, must do more to help people who lived in their now closed apartment complex. The court order is in response to a class action lawsuit from tenants detailing years of concerns about living conditions there.
This is about landlords fundamentally failing to comply with their obligations under Colorado law and nothing else.
Benjamin DeGoli is an attorney representing a former resident at the apartment complex at Colfax and Nome in Aurora. His client was one of the 300 or so people evicted from those apartments yesterday. The city shut down the building for a history of code violations. The city says it's the first time they've done that to an entire complex. In the class action lawsuit filed Monday, attorneys outlined frequent complaints about flooding, black mold, rodent infestations, busted heating, a lack of hot water, issues dating back to 2021. The suit claims the problems really came to a head earlier this year when the property owners effectively walked away. They stopped paying the water bill and stopped paying for trash pickup. Now, the property management company, CBZ Management, along with conservative city council members, say that the landlord is not to blame, that a Venezuelan gang took over the complex. The city of Aurora, Mayor Mike Kaufman, and now this new lawsuit, say the root issue is the landlord's neglect of that property that dates back years.
These landlords also allowed an unsafe environment to persist and likely fomented criminal activity. Numerous residents complained that the exterior doors to the building were never secured, broken windows were never repaired, the gates to the building were never repaired and were often left open.
So district court judge is requiring the management company to provide a habitable unit or a hotel room for any evicted resident who wants one. That order lasts for 2 weeks unless a judge extends it. The lawsuit ultimately seeking back rent for residents who have lived at that complex since 2022. A man in prison for murder is trying to overturn his conviction now that the DNA scientist on his case is under criminal investigation. His attorney says that motion is the first of its kind after the Colorado Bureau of Investigation learned that its star DNA expert messed with data on hundreds of cases. Michael Clark is the man serving life. He's been in 12 years. Jury convicted him for shooting and killing a guy in 1994 at an apartment complex in Boulder. The case went unsolved for years until the CBI's Missy Woods analyzed DNA in the case. A motion filed this week is trying to overturn Clark's conviction, saying that Woods gave false testimony.
In his first trial, Missy Woods was presented as the star scientist. The reality is she was already well into her course of misconduct, of lying and cheating and deleting data. If that information had been available at the time of trial, there would be no conviction.
The DA in Boulder says the CBI found no issues with Woods' analysis on that particular case. The DA's office will still review the evidence, and they said that they expect more similar motions to be filed in other cases. So perhaps you heard that Colorado schools are fully funded for the first time in years. State legislators and the governor celebrated that at the end of the last legislative session. But if schools are fully funded, why are some school districts going to ask voters for more money or permission to borrow money? Politics guy Marshall Zellinger explains the math.
Laredo Middle School in Cherry Creek will be replaced with a new school in the field next to it if voters in that district approve a bond measure on November's ballot. Those voters are also being asked for a mill levy override, a property tax increase of about $15 a month on a $500,000 home.
This is a way for our local community to invest in their schools and see tangible results in their community.
Scott Smith is the chief financial officer of Cherry Creek Schools, which, like other school districts, have to explain that when the state announced schools were fully funded, that did not mean all needs are met. Local property taxes do not get most school districts to the total amount. So when the state said it was fully funding schools, it meant that state dollars would fully cover the difference.
We are seeking a mill levy override to continue to invest in safety and security. We're also going to ask for a bond, which is only for capital needs, things like buildings and infrastructure.
Districts are responsible for covering the cost of capital needs, like building improvements. That's what bond questions are for. Cherry Creek's bond would pay for safety improvements, and the first bullet point deals with bullets, adding ballistic window film to school windows.
This product is intended to ensure that the glass doesn't shatter and that folks cannot enter the building that way, and gives us time to lock down the building and time for law enforcement to arrive.
Aurora Public Schools will also ask voters for help.
We're doing a bond, $1 billion bond question.
The part of the property tax that residents pay toward Aurora Public Schools is about to go down. APS wants voters to approve a new mill, a new property tax, that will have residents still paying the same total amount.
We've found a way to ask approval for something that will not increase their taxes simultaneously, and I think that's compelling.
So if APS gets what it's asking, residents will not see a drop in their property tax, and the district can fund maintenance and new projects, like brand new schools that don't exist, and a new Laredo Elementary School, which has the same name but is different than Cherry Creek's middle school. New needs that go beyond the fully funded label.
Do you hear that? It's 4 people shouting at the TV screen, "What about the pot tax?" We will get emails that say that. Just so you know, the part of marijuana money that funds schools is basically for buildings, and it's usually for rural districts. And so when these larger districts are asking for bond measures, that is the part that would pay for buildings and things that they're likely not getting from the small part of the pot tax that everybody thinks was paying for all of schools, and it's not.
I feel like what Aurora is doing is very relatable to any of us that have certain shopping habits, right? You save an expenditure in one place. Oh, I saved 50 bucks on that jacket. And then you instantly grab $50 in other merchandise because you've saved the money. So you're walking out spending what you thought you were going to spend.
That's called going to Target.
That is called going to Target. All right, Marshall, thank you. There is life-saving work that is being done for babies in neonatal intensive care units, NICUs, up and down the Front Range. But sometimes the parents, those worried, exhausted, stressed beyond measure parents, can fall through the cracks a bit. That led to the creation of a nonprofit in our community called Love for Lily. They support the families and the medical teams inside Colorado's NICUs, created by parents who literally have been there. Love for Lily supports the parents of NICU babies with the small things like bags of essential items they don't want to run out and buy when their kid is sick, to the bigger things like group counseling sessions where parents can de-stress and talk with some of the few people who truly understand what they're going through, to the really big things. Grant money to help parents taking babies home to pay for oxygen for those babies or therapies for the child that are not covered by insurance, even pay for counseling for the parents. Love for Lily also offers grants for bereavement and funeral costs for the parents of babies who don't make it. They aim to make a lifelong impact for those NICU babies and their families. The organizers told me how preemie babies these days are being resuscitated at 22 weeks instead of 24 weeks, which means that those babies have a chance. They have a long road ahead. Love for Lily is there for them and for their families for the long term. Scan the QR code on your screen or text the word thanks to 303-871-1491 to get that link to donate. As you have long proven, even $5 adds up quick, so as always, I'll match the first 50 donations of $5 to get us rolling. More than 3,000 of you have signed up to simplify your giving with a monthly donation to the Word of Thanks Fund. You put in your info once, we don't fill your inbox with emails, and you help out every cause. We started recent micro-giving campaigns as a result with $22,000 for those nonprofits. Use that same QR code or text to get there.
There is a reality in which there may be some abortion seekers that we're not able to support.
Colorado's abortion fund is spending millions, but demand is ahead of funding, so now some patients might lose out on assistance. Democratic VP pick Tim Walz came to Denver today and left with money. No questions asked. That's next. Not sure just how much we'll see of the presidential tickets here in Colorado. Few think the state's in play. It's pretty blue. But there's some green here too. So the Democrats' presumptive VP pick Tim Walz came to Denver today to collect some cash at a fundraiser. The motorcade with the governor of Minnesota zipped in, zipped out. In between, there was a high-dollar fundraiser at a mansion, like a literal mansion. Very nice place. The fundraiser's organizer, owner of the property, Democratic megadonor Tim Gill, estimates they raised about $3 million for the Harris Victory Fund. Colorado Sun was allowed inside to report for all media. They report that Walz spoke for about 15 minutes, went after Republicans' restrictions on abortion and book bans, voiced support for Ukraine's war against Russia. Walz did not answer any questions from local media before or after the fundraiser. The Harris-Walz campaign did not respond to our request for an interview. We'll keep trying. Even if Colorado's not in play, we still would like you to hear from all of the presidential tickets directly. Bringing Kathy Sabin now for a look ahead at the weather.
A little calmer today, the severe weather threat lower, as is the flood threat, but it's not entirely dry. Tracking thunderstorms moving from west to east off the foothills that could produce a brief heavy downpour. We've seen that on radar, and cooler temperatures are the result. 77 in Denver after a high of 89 today. The wind's been picking up, creating some issues out at DIA and across the foothills, but some of the wind has to do with these gusty thunderstorms that are racing out onto the eastern plains. Again, heavy rain, thunder, lightning, Fort Morgan to Sterling, up west of Fort Collins, up toward Kremling. So far in Denver, we've had some light showers pass through the city. They move pretty quickly, but again, a brief heavy downpour in the next couple of hours, not out of the question. Highlands Ranch, Castle Rock, Parker, and Ponderosa Park as they track east. Speaking of east, that is where the severe weather threat remains tonight, north and east of Denver, but an air quality alert back in play tonight through 4 o'clock tomorrow, even with all that wonderful moisture in the air and all of that blue sky we saw today. So widely scattered storms moving out tonight. We get some sunshine tomorrow, a drier day, and the beginning of a drying trend that will see temperatures back in the 90s by Friday and probably for the weekend. 1 or 2 storms to keep an eye on tomorrow. Tonight, temperatures in the 70s with a stray rain shower possible. Could be heavy, and then it moves out. Skies will clear. We drop into the 60s. Tomorrow, we have a dry day at 86, 90s for Friday and Saturday. A warm, dry weather trend into early next week when rain from thunderstorms back in our forecast for Monday and Tuesday.
Patients seeking abortions are coming to Colorado faster than providers and advocates can keep up. The state's largest abortion access fund warns it's hitting its limit. That's next. Colorado's main abortion access fund, Cobalt, says it is hitting its financial limit 2 years after the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. The fund's now putting caps on patient assistance funds as they're in the middle of a record-breaking year. Cobalt says the number of patients seeking abortions in Colorado has been tracking up since surrounding states started passing restrictions in 2022. Since then, the fund's costs to cover travel and medical care have exploded from about $700,000 a year to a projected $2 million this year. Cobalt's abortion fund director says it's due to a variety of factors. There are national abortion funds also capping patient assistance, and there are a larger number of patients being forced to schedule abortions later in their pregnancy, which is more expensive.
There were more abortion seekers accessing care here in Colorado. We saw appointment dates get pushed out further and further. And as we know, pregnancy is on a timeline. And so this was pushing people further into their pregnancy to be able to access care. That increases the cost of their procedure, which makes that more inaccessible.
Cobalt says their patient assistance cap is based on their current patient capacities. They're hoping they don't have to turn people away. Rather than offering less funding to each patient, Cobalt says they plan to offer as much assistance to each patient until they hit their cap. We're back with your feedback next. When babies are in the NICU, their parents are often left in a sort of limbo, trying to navigate that scary situation without a lot of support. The nonprofit Love for Lily is there with resources based on the personal experience of parents who have been through that same journey. The nonprofit offers parents the small essentials that are often forgotten during long hospital stays, and also group counseling sessions where they can share their worries with other parents who know and understand. And here's something that they do that we can be particularly helpful with. They offer direct financial assistance to families who are taking babies home to cover what falls through the gaps in insurance, whether that's care for the baby or longer-term help for the parents like therapy. Scan the QR code on your screen or text the word thanks to 303-871-1491 to join me and other Coloradans in supporting the work of Love for Lily. Feedback tonight from Mike, who says, what's the difference between homeless and unhoused? We talked about the homeless number, but unsheltered homelessness increased. Totally get it, Mike. Some of these terms are a little bit confusing, right? So you have homelessness, folks who do not have their own place to stay. Then you have the unsheltered homelessness. Those are the folks who are living on the streets, living in a tent, living in a car. There are people who are homeless who are not unsheltered, right? They could be staying in a short-term shelter, a long-term shelter, crashing with a friend, but they are still homeless because they're this close to being on the streets because they don't have a place to live. Hope that's a helpful explanation. A text, Kyle, you said Colorado's pretty blue. Wanted to mention that is not the case. A majority of districts vote red, just Denver votes blue. Yes, indeed, anonymous texter. If we allowed land to vote instead of people, then Colorado would be red. The tricky thing is in America, they're really insistent that people get to vote.